tēnei o ngā hōtaka o Koniahi Kōrero, o tira ki koutou rā e mātakitaki mai nei I tēnei pāpā o Mataora ki rungi I Facebook, I pukamata, kei te ki te ki koutou ko wai, kei taku taa. Nā reira Sha, e mihi ana ki koe, mō tō whaiwā ki te kōrero tai kia au, o tira ki te marea e whakarongo mai nei hoki. Nā reira, ka tuku te rākau ki a koe, kia wakamoho atu ki te katoa. Ko wai koe, no hea koe, aua ahuatanga katoa. I'm sure everyone probably already knows who you are, Sha, but just in case they're living under a rock, well, let them know anyway. Kei a koe te wā.
Tēnā koe Te Aorangi, ko te mea tuatai ai I atu ki a koe. Me tēnei kaupapa nui o te Koniahi Kōrero e whai ake nei. Tātou e whakarongo ana, kai runga I tēnei tō tātou reo irirangi o te koremako o Taranaki. Nō reira, I runga I tērā, ka tuku te mei mai o a ki a koe. Mō tēnei tono ki te aramai, ki te noo tai, ki te whakawiti-witi nā kōrero e pāniki, nā kaupapa o te ao, nā kaupapa o te wā. Engari, kai te mohi o te nuinga ko tēnei kaupapa nui kia hau ko te rongoā. Engari, ai tika ana tērā, he uri tēnei mai nā ka ui maunga. Mai I te tao tōku nei karaua me tōku nei kuia e uri tēnei mai I a Taranaki tuturu. Engari he ununga uki kia paua kai ki a kaitake uki. Engari, mo I ana mātou, uri rauna te maunga nā ununga tātou I a tātou. Engari, koina te menui kia au. Engari, I te tao tōku nei karau e uri tēnei mai I a orimo piko kai reira Ngāti Tamarango, kai reira uki a Ngāti Haumia, me era atu o nā apu I reira. Uri rauna ki te tao tōku nei kuia, he uri ahau no Ngāti Aupoto, no te paipai o te raukura, no pari aka tēnei. Ai, koina te ahuatanga tōku nei whanau, engari e noo ana ahau kei raro I te maru o kāpiti motu tai atu ki te paimaunga o Tararua. Engari, koina te wā ino o tōku nei pāpa, he uri tēnei uki mai I a Ngāti Tōrangatira, I a Ngāti Raukawa te au ki te tunga ara ko Ngāti Uia ki Ngāti Wiiwii. Ai, koina te onunga ki wainganui a tātou I tēnei wā. Nō reira, ki te tuakana, ki te māreikura, tēnā koe.
Tēnā koe, Sha, ana, e mihi tonu ana, e rere tonu ana ngā mei ki koutou rā e noo ana ki te tuara tapu o te rangi haiata. Ai, koe nei ngā mihi hoki ki koutou katoa e hono mai nei ki te Whakarongo ki tō koutou tamahine. Tō koutou mō kōpuna, tō koutou I ramatu, aira e mihi ana ki koutou mo te tiaki tō tātou nei taonga I a Sha, mo te wāroa rawa atu. Nā reira e mihi ana e te iwi e te whanau e Whakarongo mai nei. It's great to have you with us right now, Sha, especially on the back of the kōrero on Saturday night that you shared with our fellow uri, mārei kura me ki ngā wahine e whakarauora I tēnei ahuatanga o te rongoā, ki wainganui a tātou katoa. It was wonderful. It was great feedback from everybody about how much they enjoyed the kōrero and the opportunity to interact and the access to the mātauranga, actually, because you don't often really get that free access, I guess, just through a screen too, you know, without having to leave your house and go and wānanga and get out there, which is obviously probably what we want to be doing. But in these times, being able to access that kōrero, and so mai I te korimako o Taranaki ka mihi kauatu ki koutou I whakatūtū taua kaupapa. So you've told us already about yourself, your pepeha, you're from everywhere around here.
Yes.
Taranaki hātua. But just can you expand a little bit more on where you were raised, and has that had an impact on informing your rongoā practice as it is today?
Absolutely, and I think when I think about most of the peeps that I hang with, which is mainly rongoā peeps, and that's people from all walks of life, I need to say that, the influence of your upbringing always makes a difference, whether you realise you're on this pathway or not. So just to give you some context, I was the only baby of my parents to be born down here, so conceived in Manukau. I'm going to say that, my mother's going to kill me, but conceived in Manukau, just north of Outtakes, and born here in Paraparaumu, here in Kapiti. But my other three siblings were all born at Cottage Hospital in Opunake. So they were born and raised in Oanui, around Whanau in Taranaki. And so, they certainly have, from what I would consider a Taranaki vibe, they're really kind of, from a Māori toe perspective, they've got more of that going on for them than I have. So I'll just say that, it's out the bag. And my father used to laugh, when they moved back. So mum and dad met in Taranaki. Dad's family moved from Manukau up to Taranaki because they were working in the farming industry and the milk factories. And so Dad's family kind of moved up there from Manukau. Dad was schooled up there, so he, his most fondest memories was living in Taranaki. And met Mum. Mum was doing his pay, and she put a little love note in there to meet her at the pictures at everybody's picture theatre. She's really going to kill me, but anyway, it's out there now. And they hooked up there. So people that know Opunake know everybody's. And so that's where their love blossomed and where us as children came to be. But mum and dad, for work reasons, came home. Dad got a job down here, and so they followed work, like most people, right?
Yeah.
They followed the mahi. And so Dad got a job down here with my uncle driving, and they moved down here. Now, I had the fortunate thing of interviewing Mum about that movement from Taranaki to here. So, she got 11 siblings. So when you've come from, where, obviously Nanny and Koko had no power, no lights, because, they had that many children. You're used to having a big whanau around you. And so coming down here, even though Dad and them had brothers and sisters, it wasn't the same. So she was always interacting, inside of her whanau and her apu from a whanau perspective. So to come down here with children, I know that was hard. And Mum will never say that, but that's the reality. She came to a very different place and space. She loved my kuia and my nanny, my kōrero, and all of those aunties and uncles that came down here too, that she was around, but it was different. So I was raised with that. And I think because I was younger, I spent a lot of time at the rekereke of my mother and my father. And so hung with people that they hung with. And so I remember the first time I met like Uncle Sanewaru, for example. So he was filming Utu, I think, at that time, over in the hut. I was only young, but I just remember this man walking in, and I was kind of like
Wow.
he just had his presence, right? And he came in, and he'd come for a cup of tea to see Mum and Dad. But because he still had, he didn't have a moko, but he had, for that movie, they had put a moko on him. And I remember I'd never seen one in the flesh. I'd seen them in photos, but I hadn't seen it in the flesh. And I remember thinking, holy heck, who's this guy? And I just remember sitting by my mum's legs, looking up at him, just in awe. And when I think about it, I had Dad's other uncles who, one was, our master carver here at Wehiwehi. He'd come, he'd pull up in his combi van, and he was really cool. He learnt to carve over in Rotorua. And all of these old people that used to come. And I remember just kind of being really mesmerised by them and then the kōrero that would transpire.
Yeah,
so
right.
I suppose, you know, by osmosis, that's what I was exposed to, and I didn't know I was. And even though we went home in Taranaki, Dad took us home all the time. So, you know, Mum used to get, I suppose, muke, so we would go home a lot. And I just remember you know, one of my grandfather's things that he would do is he was a man of the wai. So every time before we'd go home, we'd be out at the tap, and Mum would be, you know, she would get waka ere. So she'd be having karakia and putting the wai over us before we travelled. And I remember thinking, oh, you know, because it must be 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, whatever time we were leaving. And just remember, I used to think it was an inconvenience, but all of those things, you know, they're ways that just permeate through you. And so that became the tikanga. And then we'd go up to Nanengokos, who were living in Ngāmotu by then, and move from Opunake up to there. And that would be the way. There were lines of us when we'd go home. So if all my aunties and uncles had come home, there'd be lines of us at the tap. It was hilarious.
Right.
You know, ready to go on that morning when we were ready to leave to go home. So, you know, did I know that rongoā was being infused into my life? Probably not. But actually, yeah, it was. So those, you know, those are parts of a bigger story that start to weave impressions upon you.
Yes, that just and the fact that everybody was doing it. So it was definitely a practice, a whanau practice within the unit that it just was normalised, completely normalised at the end, and it was present enough for it to be a memory in your mind, and so it obviously impactful also. And so you take that as one of your earliest experiences, and then you go through life, and then you end up where you are right now, in this rongoā space. And you and I met a few years ago.
Yes, we did.
I'm trying to think about how was that? How did we meet? Actually,
it was a random meeting through Te Whanau Raukawa. I don't know how we met through there, actually, to be honest. Oh, actually, it might have been Makai's page.
Oh my gosh, that's right.
So
we will. Yep. So whānau, you'll probably be thinking, oh gosh, now what are they going on about? But I'll tell you what. So for me, all forms, rongoā comes in different forms, right? And at that point in time, that was a rongoā definitely. For me, that group. So we were part of a motivation group, a whole heap of us wahine getting out there and doing active things together. And I've spoken about this a little bit, my journey with postnatal depression, and how that group actually did help me get through healthy food and exercise. You know, we all know, hey, that's a rongoā in itself. So we're talking about that right now, and obviously you're a practitioner, a consistent practitioner.
We all are.
Yes, we all are. We all are in our own ways, I guess. So what do you see these days? You know, there's a lot of teka practices that are going on around the place, but what do you think in regards to mahi tika and rongoā? What do you think has made an impact on today's practice and the visibility of the practice of rongoā?
Okay, so when you say that kupu tika, I think of Uncle Tiki Raumati, because you know that one of his big sayings was about being tika or being teka. And so that's what that brings up for me. That's what's ringing in my ears when you say that. And I think it's a really important time for us to be having a conversation about what is tika or what are tikanga. What are the right processes and practices that should be visible and we should be exposing ourselves to. And you might laugh at that, being exposed to things. But, you know, I think about that. because we're in a digital age that brings everything full and frontal, that certainly has an impact on what is available to people. And so I just want to I'm going to shape it up that way. And so you can go on YouTube and you can learn how to make any old kind of pani. You can go on YouTube and you can learn about, this little kōrero about from a tohunga that gives you this part of the wānanga that was this big. And to some degree, and this is the edge of caution, is that that's great because it does expose our people who may not have ever known what rongoā is to asking the questions, what is this? I've never heard of it. How come our family never, it does raise questions. But I also think the big cautionary sign we have to take from that is that's not it. Whatever you're seeing on the screen isn't it, because it's just a little kind of extract from a bigger wānanga that needs to be had. And so, how I learnt rongoā, apart from being exposed to different parts of the breadth and depth of rongoā that there is, so it is a mātauranga, so there's practices and a knowledge centre that goes with it. So apart from being exposed to a whole lot of different people, the way I learnt was in wānanga. So koina te wāhi tika kia haunei is kanohi ki te kanohi, right? Face to face in wānanga. And I didn't choose, I was chosen. So that's another kind of a doorway, right? So in a learning space now, we take it for granted that we can choose to learn anything and everything. And it's totally accessible because, we can get a certificate and a diploma and a whatever on tap just like that. And I'm not saying that's wrong because I too have taught in those institutions and in those places. Still advocate for that because that's a pathway. But you asked me the question about what is tika. And so the tika place to learn rongoā is in wānanga. And so I'll always advocate for that. And it might sound like a real old school way of being, but you can't have the kind of experience, which is a multi-dimensional experience, without actually being in a wānanga. So when you're on these kinds of devices or these spaces, you only get kind of the elements that you get. You'll get you'll get fired up. You'll get all of that kind of the ihi-wihi will come, but actually the wana isn't there. So that's the thing of having such a life-transforming experience that you'll never, ever forget it, right?
Yes.
And that's what wānanga does for me. When I'm in that space and that time, koina te wā. When I'm in that space and in that time and I'm being held in that space and that time and in that energy, there's something else that happens. It's magic. It's our tika magic, right? And if you're having your wānanga at your marae, in your wari tūpuna, or in somebody's wari tūpuna, it's going to be even more magical because that just doubles the stakes really in terms of what opportunities might rise up. And so that's my advocacy for what is tika, because also in those wānanga, you get to be tested in a safe way. And that's kind of, again, that's the lessons that I learned, is that we were tested rigorously. So, one of the tohunga that I learned from was Te Aorangi Dillon, no nā te rere au aia. And so she was from down here, she lived down here. And I learned in different kinds of ways leading up to actually going into wānanga with her. So the first way that I learned was I used to go with my kuia to Whakarongo to sit by her while she went and had a treatment. So she'd hop on the coils, and for those from Taranaki, you might remember the coils. I don't know, people do. It's a colour kind of a healing treatment where you're hooked up to the wires and the coppers and what's in those particular healing boxes. And so she'd go for a zhuzh up, that's what I'd call it now. And then that did half the work. Of course, karakia was present, that did half the work, and then she would have whatever else she needed. So whether that was having some body work, mahi whiua or manipulation, whatever, miri, and or wairākau rongoā. But, you know, the key was she was with her cousins and in the wari tūpana. And so, you know, those are all the elements of magic for me that have laid an impression for me about what is tika. So I observe, and I don't judge, but I observe. And I can kind of tell whether somebody has that foundation or not. Because one of the things about learning in wānanga like that is we certainly got told when we were being teka. And so, you know, we had guidance around us to say you're being tika or teka. And that's the key. You know, this school or this kura wānanga, this school of learning, this school of knowledge requires a whole community around it. And that's the key. It's all those connections that make it the whole. Because that's what I would consider. So that's what I think is the question mark
tika.
Around what's tika, is that where you've learned it and how you've learned it. Because in that learning, you also learn how to protect it, and you learn how to be a protector. So, you know, one of the things you're getting tested on is how good a kaitiaki you are. And we know when we've, and I'll say it from my own learning, I know when I've played up in the past, it comes back, right? And so you have to do a lot of work to make sure that you stay on a pathway of integrity, and that you build a discipline. And that's the key, it's a discipline. And learning from mistakes is also part of the discipline.
Right. Yeah.
Because you have to work out how to make it right again.
Yeah. So just heard you talk about integrity. Would that be where the teka comes in at times?
Yeah. And I think we have to, so when I think about that word, because people go, well, how do you know? Because I've been asked that lots. How do you know? And I said, well, I can't tell you who is wrong and who is right. I can't tell you that. That's not actually even my job. But I can, you know, you got to ask yourself those questions of what feels right for you. Is it feeling good in your puku? Or is there some questions going on in there? Is it swirling around? You know, have you got questions coming up in your mind? And so are there questions that need to be answered before it's a yes or a no? Does your heart want to follow that? Okay, so you know, you go, ahine naro, a nākau, a puku. Koina tō puku mōhio. And so, you know, you already got the system that can work out whether or not it's tika or teka. And if there's any questions about it, like somebody that gives you everything all at once, I'm not sure about that. You know, I will kind of question that, because I think I've never ever kind of experienced where somebody comes with say for example, something's wrong. They've come with a mate, there's something really kind of wrong with them. I can't remember actually, when I kind of go back in my memory bank, there ever been one way to fix that. And so that's where I get a little bit, when I'm thinking about integrity, I get a bit kind of cautious when somebody goes, oh no, it's this and you do that. Because I'm different from my tuakana, and we might have the same thing going on, but actually we're quite different in our being, and what we do and how we live. So I would hope that there would be a difference in that at least.
Yeah.
So,
I want to, sorry.
Go girl.
I just want to touch on the Kaityakitanga aspect, and I guess I liken it to te reo Māori, and you know, being able to just right now is the easiest time in the history of learning te reo Māori to learn te reo Māori. You can learn it anywhere, everywhere. The classes are free. You don't even have to go to a wānanga, and you can almost become fluent in te reo Māori. But like you say, there's one thing to hear it and learn it online or through the books, but it's actually going to those wānanga and being interactive with people and practicing and getting it wrong. Like you say, rua kere, e ai kia rua kere kei te kai te hapa. But you have to learn from the hapa. And that's the whole thing of Kaityakitanga. When you talk about being protective, being a protector of a taonga, I see it as the same concept for those of us who have learnt te reo Māori, are still learning, because I'll forever be learning te reo Māori, but we understand that it comes with responsibility.
Yes.
And so that's the same with rongoā, right? It comes with a responsibility. However, for someone like me, my motivation was always to be able to cure myself of a common cold, basically. But I know I know where I'm at. I know I can do that. Can I fix a broken bone? No. I'm not gonna try go there. That is not where my skill set takes me. So it's about knowing your boundaries within that taonga and understanding you shouldn't know everything. Really? No. Would you agree with that? No one should know it all.
Ai, tika pono. How I answer that is probably the reason why we work down here as a collective, because we all came from a range of different kura, a range of different wānanga, and learned from different tohunga. And so part of that role is that, it's actually a relief, to be honest, because we don't have to have all the answers. And even though we can assist anybody, we don't need to be the first assister. So what's great about it is that depending on what is happening, we now have enough in our collective to kind of go, oh, that's so-and-so, they've got those pukinga, and that's their whakapapa, and so they're better for that role. And so it's a luxury that's not present everywhere. And I'm just going to say that it is, we eventually, when I think about my baby and those mokapunas come, it's just going to be the norm. That's the goal, right? It's the norm. So right now, we know this isn't everywhere and that this isn't the way it's working everywhere, but we've certainly trialed this out, because when our teachers and our mentors passed over, they were the tohunga o ngā tohunga. That's all I need to kind of say. But they held so much. And so what I remember being told, and I know it's come from the other ones that I work with who've come from their mentors, their tohunga, the thing was they planted different seeds in different ones. And there are different skills and pukinga linked to our whakapapa that we've been growing in. So everybody didn't get everything, but collectively, and that's what we worked out down here, collectively, when we put all that together, so I'm going like this, must be around the manga. When we put all that together, wow, how amazing is that? And so that's what we've learned, is that we don't have to be everything, because I think that's one of the traps we picked up with colonization, is that we had to be everything to everyone, and be the expert of. All that's been asked of us now is to be the best that we can of the taonga that we have been gifted, or that we now are responsible for. So when you can do that, I think, the world's your oyster when you connect all the dots up.
It's awesome to hear that. Do you think that you're just talking about we don't have to be the expert in everything, but there is a expectation out there, more from our non-Māori whanau, who they think, oh, you're Māori, you're gonna know, you'll know it all, you'll know how to do the karakia, how to do the rongoā, how to speak Māori, how to cook. Well, not all of us know how to cook, e te whanau. And do you think that in regards to rongoā, the Tohunga Suppression Act has had a huge part to play in that?
Yeah, of course. Totally. I mean, when I think about the Tohunga Suppression Act, and I think about, you know, tā Māui, Te Rangi Iroa, and the context by which they were living. So, and we know, you know, if we go back to Waitara and go to Owai and listen to the kōrero of the whānau around the amazing mahi that our tupuna did around those challenging times. We're in them now, but those challenging times. And you know, we're never gonna know now when we make decisions to do things how our mokopuna are gonna view them. And so we've got to make the best decisions now with what we've got and what we know. And so I think about the Tohunga Suppression Act, and I've heard media talk down here and up home often about, you know, those decisions that were made around the Tohunga Suppression Act and its impacts, right? And so I think, yes, it had a huge impact on our people, and it had a huge impact on the place of tohunga and access to them. But it was in a context of something that wasn't a mate Māori, you know, when I think about those things, because that's where tohunga, you know, they didn't go anywhere. They just weren't as prevalent or as seen as much because, you know, the Act, the Tohunga Suppression Act 1907, criminalised them. And so all that happened is that what we normally do, which is to protect that up. And so I've still got, you know, stories of mum and them, my grandfather accessing koro plau, who was the tohunga around us, because for things for mate Māori. So, you know, they'd moved to the farm, they were drinking from the water source there, all the kids got really sick. And so my grandfather didn't know what to do, so took the kids and everybody to koro plau, and he was able to kind of trace it all back and then linked it to the fact that blood had been spilt in that awa. And so, you know, he gave them karakia, showed them tikanga to use, and that's where that practice of the wai comes from with my koro. So my koko. So, you know, they didn't go away. It just made it harder because what happened was, you know, non-Māori became enforcers of that. Okay? Non-Māori became enforcers of it and laid seeds in there that said that our tohunga were not to be trusted. So it was misinformation was given. And then we moved away from doing and looking after ourselves at home to going to hospitals and going to doctors. And I know that that was the case because I know my grandmother, you know, it was her father who birthed her. So they birthed at home. And her father was, you know, so that's an oanui. And so I know that practice wasn't that long ago, but that was the reality of the impact, was that, you know, then when my mother was born, my grandmother was having children at Cottage Hospital. So that's the shift. That's the timeline for me. When I go boom, that's what happened. And then so to restore it, there's still a memory there in my aunties and uncles who are all in their 70s now. So there's still a memory of those times, so I can still draw from those. And do you remember when? And, you know, they've got really hilarious stories about stinking, horrible smelling pani and all sorts of things going on. Which are great. You know, we've got to have a bit of laughter in it. We've got to laugh about all of those things that our oldies put us through. But it was there. It was still present. So I know it wasn't wiped off the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And that it did impact, though, because, you know, our first port of call now is to go to the doctor. So I know it's still, that's been the impact.
Yeah.
Going and seeking an internal rongoā, so asking yourself, what should I do about this? Oh, I've got a haki on my leg, I'm going to go and have a mimi on it. You know, those kinds of conversations aren't had now, but they can be. They can be revitalised.
It's so true. And just when I heard you say, you know, the aunties and uncles talking about the stinky yucky punny, and Dad always talked about the yucky stuff that they had to have, but they had it, and they were better for it. But you know, I think now with my own kids, if they smell or got a whiff of the kumaraho that I'm actually growing, finally successfully growing kumaraho at our section, I can just imagine what they're going to think, because they've got used to having a pamau, or you know, that's full of sugar anyway. So, and just on those whanau stories, also talking to Dad, used to talk to Dad often actually about little things, or he'd just offer up kōrero. And Mimi, you're right, he was burnt in their shed, and his mother immediately made his brother Mimi into a pot. She put it straight on him, you know, things like that. Awesome. You told anyone nowadays, well, Mummy, hurry up, have a Mummy, and you know, I'm going to put that on that. Just like, you know, we've lost the art of talking about it, and even when we're talking about it, actually not making it like a sort of thing, like it's just a factual thing. It's a rongoā. And he also spoke of an old kuia who packed one of his cuts after he came off his bike with tobacco. Those sorts of things that
they used what was around them.
That's right.
What was there, right? That's such a art and a science. It's both, but it is to use what's around you. And I think, you know, that's the progression back that we can do, is to say to our kids, what is in your backyard? What's in your neighborhood? Start there. And then, you know, it's not about starting with the deficit of it, because our kids can't tiaki anything if they don't have a connection to it. So that's the thing, is start right in your backyard, then in your neighborhood, and then what's further out. And you know, like you're doing, obviously, is you're repatriating and replanting and putting back what was there before. And, you know, in our colonial history of Taranaki, we know what happened. We got, you know, all that stuff got obliterated, so we could no longer even see ourselves in the whenua. So, you know, that whole making the stance to re-indigenize our spaces is actually just, you know, koina te taranakitanga. Us living our taranakitanga is actually to make sure that our kids know these things, and that these are their birthright, and that, you know, this is the change. This is going to be the change. It's
absolutely cool. It's so cool. It's just so great. And I watch what you're doing with your tamahine too, and she's into everything. I especially like the most recent kōrero about the smells that she has. What people might think they're smelling from your house, you know.
We've had those all of those things, and you know, you do have to kind of I mean, those bring up those memories for me. I mean, I don't care, you know, I've gotten to a point now where I don't really care what people think, and I just kei te haere tonu. But there are those, that's just the going on things, because we live in such where we live here, you know, we have to make some, a little bit like you guys at home, make some pretty big stands around what's our normal. And so, you know, we don't apologise at all for any of that, having rongoā present anywhere. So one of the things we've done down here is to, if there's tangihana, one of us responds to make sure there's rongoā at a tangihana. And that's for the whānau pane, but it's for everybody really. But to, you know, it was a decision we made, because at that particular time, you know, they have the whole whānau needs that kind of care and love and to be well as they can be through that grief and loss process. And so it's kind of one of those, no one told us that was the Kaityakitanga, but we just kind of said, this is our most important time to be with whānau. One of them anyway. So making those kind of decisions, again, we didn't go to the marae and have big, huge wānanga about it. We just went, we'll just take it to our whānau. And then next thing now, where it's that, hey, can you come in? Can you bring this? Can you do that? And so it's cool that people now see that as something that is their right to have that.
It's a normalization.
Yeah.
It's gone from just a conversation to an actual practice.
Yes.
And that's the importance, because that's wānanga also. And I probably jumped in a bit late with this one, but just taking it back also to you talking about the birthing practices, and that that it was your koro who birthed his children. Now, this isn't the first kōrero that I've heard about this. I think it's in Matarako, the book Matarako, Stories of Taranaki. Whaine Nora Puketapu talks about the fact that her father, he was the midwife, and she has a memory. She's told me this herself too. She has a memory of him. They've just birthed one of the children, and he's saying, "Come and have a look," in there, all looking inside like this box, the baby all wrapped up. Like, isn't that just straight away? That gives our children confidence, because it's something that they tangibly, physically had an experience with. I mean, the closest we would get nowadays is the choice to have a home birth. However, unless you do that really quickly before your midwife can get there. And I've been in a situation where that's nearly happened, and I wouldn't say I was confident enough to be like, I hope the midwife doesn't turn up. That's for sure. It was more like, where's the midwife, man? But unless you had the opportunity, I guess, to do that, it wouldn't necessarily be the norm. So it's, oh God, you got me thinking.
Good.
You definitely got me thinking here.
That's what I'm saying. It's the everyday, from birth to death life cycle, because that's our life cycle. Rongoā is intrinsic to it all. It's not just, so we've bought into this idea because it's been, how long was it? 1967, the Tohunga Suppression Act got repealed. So that was 55 years of enough hammering to say we don't need this kind of practice to distract us from being systemized. So I'm just going to say it. So 67, and we think about the Renaissance that happened with Kohanga Reo movement, Te Aorangi, all of those things. So that was all a reclamation. But it's kind of like, this is the intrinsicness of rongoā, is that it was in every part of our daily living. So it wasn't this thing when we were sick, so only when we were sick. So that's kind of the challenges, is that let's not buy into the narrative that's coming from the health system, that rongoā equals this, it's Māori medicine. We have to truly, and that's my kind of thing with Taranaki, is I'm open to that exploration again of this narrative of rongo and rongoā, because I think we have to we have to fill it in a different way with kōrero that's coming from the whenua, from the people from the whenua, around what this looks like now. And then that, because what that does is it locates us in the present time, and then it asks us, well, what was done back then? And so it gets people talking in that whānau about what's going on, what happened back then, who did what, and it opens up a dialogue and a narrative to then start to go, well, now what do we want? Because in the sector of rongoā, we're always going to be the poor cousins right now, because we don't have a big, huge kind of a māngai going, this is the way it should be, and we should be in everything. So just to know that in the health spectrum, we're even behind Hawara Māori. So we're the first medicine, if we think about it. This is first medicine stuff. But we're right back in the trenches when it comes to lining up for anything. And it's not even considered. It can be an afterthought. So that's some of the challenges to our own whanau and our own people, is that this should not be an afterthought. It's an everyday thought. And I remember Auntie Olive saying, this is, rongoā is the people's medicine. And that just kind of just vibes me out, because I just go, she's so true. It's the people's medicine, right? So when we think about firing that up, it's the people that's going to make this happen or not. And it's whether or not we believe it's important enough. And I just think it is. It's the time, the right time. Yeah.
So that comes down to strategies too, to put in place moving forward. But what I like, there's many points that I like that I've heard, is a succession, and actually teaching our kids what we know. We're not going to know it all, so we've got to access the rest of it outside of our backyard. However, let's get them to know their backyard instead of jumping out somewhere else. Because also, like what you're saying around, it's you don't wait till you're sick. In a sense, rongoā isn't about waiting till you're so sick, and I think we live in that self-gratifying sort of an era that, okay, I'm just going to push. I know that if I get really sick, and if I'm really, if I can't do it myself, then I'll just go get me some cold and flu tablets, and then I'll be right as rain within a day or so, and I'll just go back to it, instead of that real understanding of long-term self-care from the womb to the tomb, those babies having those experiences, because that creates connection, having a relationship with your taiao so you understand what's going on, what's actually going on here, man. I mean, we talk about it, but we're quite happy to put any old thing into our body when we think about it, like just...
I mean, I like what you said about womb to the tomb, I te ao ki te pō, it's that kōrero. It's kind of like, it shouldn't just be, something when we say, because I think, one of the things, again, that we were taught is that this is, in the modern context, rongoā is complementary. It's complementary to everything, actually. And so there's nothing that it doesn't not sit well with that's good for you. So that's when I think about it. So, it does, he rongoā te kai, he kai te rongoā, Percy Tipene. It was his kind of mantra in terms of getting back to the mara, getting back. That's who we were. When I think about the stories of us being mara people from around the maunga, we have my uncles maintained, and we have some here growing. We have a white taro which comes from home. And so, we've all got stories of that in terms of the different liwai, or the taro, or the hui, or the kumara, whatever it is that we may still have in our whanau. Those are the stories. And so, getting back to the whenua, and we're going to call ourselves tangata whenua, then we have to get back to the whenua. We have to get back to those narratives, because that's where it lies. And our kids, they deserve that. So in terms of it being complementary to everything, one of the things is by when we're living in that way, it's a preventative strategy. So when we're growing our own kai, the modi's going to be up, we're going to be connected to the whenua, so our wairua gets fed. If we're going down to get kina or paua or whatever, we're making sure that pātaka kai as well. We're looking after that place. It's looking after us. That's all preventative stuff. It's a prevention strategy. So, that's the bigness of this, is that when we truly rongo, when we listen with all of our senses, and koina te rongoā, then that's us fulfilling that potentiality.
Ooh, damn.
Yeah, damn. Yeah.
I mean, so I spoke with Mari Gregory Hunt a couple of weeks ago. She said the same thing, in a sense, the same thing. Connection, preventative, it does complement other things. You know, e te whanau koutou rai whakarongo mai nei. I mean, the art is in the rongo, I guess. Ata whakarongo ki ngā kōrero e tākoha atu ki koutou, and then is to get out there and create that connection. Really understand the connection. We talk about it, we sing about it, we haka about it, we poi to it, and we karakia about it. We have to start doing it. And even if not for ourselves, maybe, you know, because we have this thing about, I can't put myself as, well, do it for your kids and do it for your mokopuna who are to come. I feel like there's going to need to be a part 2 to this. This is part 1, e te whanau. Actually, no, this is part 2. You heard part 1 on Saturday night just gone. This is part 2. Part 3 will be coming again this Saturday evening, and then I think we'll have to go part 4, Shah, because there's a few things that we've missed. But
sure.
Just quickly, how does all of this, what we've just talked about right now, how does this how is it relevant right now? We're going through a worldwide pandemic.
Okay, all right. Okay, where does so you know, one of the things about rongo, so going back to the use of tai rongo, our senses, is that it means we have to stay present. And I think one of the biggest challenges to us is that with what's going on around us and our accessibility to te ao whānui, we can be projected out into a future that hasn't even arrived. And then we can also dwell in a place that's only in the past. And sometimes neither of those 2 other places are useful for us. And so how does rongoā kind of respond to a pandemic? Well, it always has. You know, for me, it's coming back to some fundamentals, really, which is to look after yourself, to look after yourself. Because even though we don't, you know, we can challenge, that concept can be challenged about a self-care, looking at self, only doing for self. But we know our self is in a context of a whānau and in the context of a hapu and an iwi. And so it's never by ourselves. It's kind of like, you know, this view of ourselves is that we've got to make sure we're tau and that we're well. And so the rongoā response to this is to constantly bring our attention outside of the real virus that's going on outside of us, which can be fear of the future, because we know there's lots of that going on. And so fear can be a huge activator for mental unwellness and instability. It can be a huge activator. So those, you know, we only have to look inside of the other health system, and, you know, anxiety's up, depression's up, all of those kinds of mental illnesses are up. So that is a helplessness that comes from fear. And so when you come back to yourself, you know, you've got to ask yourself those questions. What do I know about me? Have I survived things before? Of course I have. Am I going to survive this? Of course you are. Do I need to make some adjustments? Of course I do. And what do those look like? Do I need to reach out to somebody else? Of course I do. You know, all of those practical things, which means you have to listen with all of your senses to yourself. And then you put that in the context, say, in our meru, And that's going on for everyone. So
Yes.
if we can kind of teach ourselves to look after ourselves and to activate and to encourage well-being at a personal and at whānau level, because that's what I think these lockdowns do, is it makes you have to reassess your whānau life. Is that really living that other life? Or is this, or are we living for the future of coming out of lockdown level 3, level 2, whatever? We're not actually in the moment.
Right.
So, you know, that's koina kia ata whakarongo, to the art of really listening to what's going on with your whānau and responding appropriately. That's when you're really present with wairua mauri, okay? And you're responding appropriately. You take what you learned from the past. So again, you can take what you learned from the last pandemic lockdown and go, are there things we can improve on? Did we improve on them or what? And so you can take that immediate past, or you can go right back, however far back you want to go, and go, what did we learn? Because that's the key to the past, is it's taking the learning forward, not the hara. Don't bring the hara forward, bring the learning forward. And that's what we've got to learn to karo. And so rongoā helps us to kind of get really clear around boundaries and that discipline I talked about making sure, you know, once you open something up, you've got to close it down. And you've got to kind of know where you're sitting. And so, you know, when we think about different karakia, different ruruku, wairea, those kinds of practices that our old people had, and that currently we still have, those were utilised for those times to make sure that we knew where we were and how we were transitioning through different times. So that's how I kind of think from a thinking level, rongoā can be useful in this time of a pandemic, because it brings you right back to the reality of your now. Present.
And again, yes, and the present, and encourages connection. Again,
Yes.
I'm stuck on that. I'm stuck
totally
on that.
Connection, sis. Totally connection. Yep.
On the connectedness and the relationship that we want to have with whatever we're using to heal ourselves, I guess. Ngā mihi nui. Ngā mihi nui. Rāua atu ki koe e Shā mo tō tainga mai ki wainganui a mātou katoa. O tira koutou rā e whakarongo mai nei ki tēnei o ngā mata uraura o Te Aorangi me ki. I know everyone will be. One of my friends, she watched one of these and she took 4 pages of notes. Now I've already told her that I'm talking with you today, and that it'll show again tomorrow on the show. And she's, I'll be waiting. So,
cool. Hey, hit us up with the notes. If you're taking the notes, hit us up with the notes. Because honestly, these kinds of kōrero, I never know what's going to come and what kōrero is going to drop. So yeah, cool. I'll watch it again too. So nā mihi kia koe e te tuakana.
Ngā mihi nui. Nā reira e te whānau koutou rā e whakarongo mai nei ki Koniahi Kōrero, kei te mei ka atu ki koutou noho haumaru ki roto i o koutou nei ware, no o mo'o au ki roto i o koutou nei kāinga. Ahakoa ko heke anō tātou ki te pai haumaru tuarua, whai tonu i ngā tikanga o te whakapai i a koe, nā ko te karere pia, ko puta mai i tēnei, me whakapono te tangata ki tāna e whakapono ai. Nā reira e te whānau, e mihi ana hei konei, hei